Zara pressed herself against the cold metal wall of the transport ship, her purple skin flushing darker with fear. Through the small window, she could see the human military base growing larger as their ship approached the landing pad. Her 3 hearts hammered in her chest, each beating at a different rhythm, creating a chaotic drum that made her feel sick. "Why did I agree to this?" she whispered to herself in her native Cytherian tongue. Her delicate antennae twitched nervously as she watched the gray buildings and towers of the human outpost. Everything looked so harsh and brutal, just like the stories her grandmother used to tell her. The other passengers on the transport were mostly traders and diplomats, all trying to look calm and professional, but Zara could smell their fear too. It had a sharp, metallic scent that made her stomach turn. Everyone knew the stories about humans. They were the monsters who conquered worlds without mercy. They were the beasts who fought wars that lasted for decades. They were the creatures who never gave up, even when facing impossible odds. "Attention, passengers," came the pilot's voice over the speaker system. "We are now approaching Outpost Meridian. All visitors must report to the registration office immediately upon landing. Please have your identification ready." Zara clutched her travel documents tighter. She was here on behalf of her people, the Cytherians, to discuss a trade agreement. Her species was known throughout the galaxy for their advanced medical technology and healing abilities. The humans desperately needed their help to treat a plague that was spreading through their outer colonies. But despite the importance of her mission, Zara couldn't shake the terror that gripped her. The ship landed with a soft thud, and the other passengers began gathering their belongings. Zara remained frozen in her seat, watching through the window as human soldiers approached the ship. They wore dark armor that covered their entire bodies, making them look like mechanical death machines. Their faces were hidden behind black visors, and they carried weapons that seemed far too large for any reasonable purpose. "Miss?" A gentle voice beside her made Zara jump. She turned to see an elderly Centaurian trader looking at her with concern. "Are you all right? We need to disembark now." Zara nodded quickly and stood on shaking legs. She followed the group of passengers toward the ship's exit, her breathing becoming more shallow with each step. The stories her grandmother had told her echoed in her mind. Humans were ruthless warriors who showed no mercy to the weak. They conquered entire species and enslaved those who survived. They were incapable of gentleness or compassion. The ship's door opened with a hiss, and Zara felt the alien air of the human world fill her lungs. It was thicker than she was used to, with a strange taste that made her antennae curl. The gravity was slightly heavier, too, making each step feel labored and difficult. The human soldiers stood in formation near the landing pad, their weapons held ready. Zara tried to make herself as small as possible as she walked between them, certain that at any moment they would decide she was a threat and eliminate her. But they simply watched in silence as the passengers filed past. The registration office was a stark, gray building with small windows and thick walls. Inside, the lighting was harsh and white, nothing like the soft, natural illumination that Cytherians preferred. Zara joined the line of beings waiting to be processed, her eyes darting around nervously at the human officials behind their desks. When her turn came, Zara approached the registration desk with trembling hands. The human behind the counter was a middle-aged woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. She looked up from her computer terminal and smiled. "Welcome to Outpost Meridian," the woman said in perfect galactic standard. "May I see your identification, please?" Zara handed over her documents, surprised by the woman's polite tone. She had expected harsh demands and threatening words. The human woman examined the papers carefully, entering information into her computer. "Ah, you're Dr. Zara Velthis, from the Cytherian Medical Institute," the woman said, looking up with interest. "We've been expecting you." Your reputation as a healer precedes you, Doctor. We're very grateful that you've come to help us." Zara blinked in surprise. You know who I am?" "Of course. Your research on cellular regeneration has saved countless lives throughout the galaxy. Commander Hayes specifically requested that we ensure you have everything you need during your stay." The woman stamped Zara's documents and handed them back. "Your quarters are in Building C, Level 3. Here's your security badge and a map of the facility. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Zara took the items with shaking hands, still stunned by the woman's kindness. This wasn't what she had expected at all. As she made her way through the corridors of the base, following the map, she noticed more things that contradicted the stories she had heard. The walls were decorated with artwork from dozens of different species. There were paintings of Centaurian landscapes, sculptures made by the crystalline Vorthan, and even some traditional Cytherian healing symbols. Human children played in a small park area, laughing and running around with alien children of various species. It was nothing like the cold, militaristic environment she had imagined. Her quarters were larger and more comfortable than she had expected. The room had been decorated with soft, warm colors that reminded her of home. There were even some Cytherian meditation crystals arranged on a small table by the window. Someone had clearly gone to great effort to make her feel welcome. As Zara unpacked her belongings, she found herself questioning everything she had been told about humans. The people she had encountered so far seemed polite, even kind. Perhaps the stories were exaggerated, she thought. Perhaps her grandmother's tales were just old fears from a time when species didn't understand each other. The next morning, Zara made her way to the medical facility where she would be working. The laboratory was state-of-the-art, with equipment that rivaled anything she had seen on her home world. Human doctors and scientists worked alongside beings from a dozen different species, all collaborating to find a cure for the plague. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of the medical team, greeted Zara warmly. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, nothing like the brutal warriors from the stories. She showed Zara around the facility, introducing her to the other researchers and explaining their current progress. "We're so honored to have you here," Dr. Chen said as they walked through the main laboratory. "Your expertise with cellular healing could be exactly what we need to break through this problem." Zara found herself relaxing as the day progressed. The human scientists were intelligent and dedicated, asking thoughtful questions about her methods and sharing their own research openly. They treated her not as an outsider or potential threat, but as a valued colleague. But it was late in the afternoon when everything changed. Zara was working at her assigned station, examining samples of the plague virus, when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and a voice over the intercom announced a security alert. "All non-essential personnel report to designated safe areas immediately. This is not a drill." Through the laboratory windows, Zara could see human soldiers running toward the perimeter of the base. Their movements were quick and coordinated, but there was something different about them now. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by something harder and more focused. Dr. Chen appeared at Zara's side, her face tense. "We need to get you to the shelter," she said, taking Zara's arm gently but firmly. "What's happening?" Zara asked as they hurried through the corridors. "Pirates," Dr. Chen replied grimly. "The Savage Stars gang has been hitting outposts in this sector. They target places like this, hoping to steal medical supplies and technology." Zara's 3 hearts began racing again. She had heard of the Savage Stars. They were a brutal gang of various species who showed no mercy to anyone. They killed for sport and profit, caring nothing for the suffering they caused. If they broke through the base's defenses, the shelter was a reinforced bunker beneath the main medical building. Dozens of civilians, humans, aliens, and their children huddled together in the dimly lit space. Zara found herself pressed against a wall, surrounded by frightened beings trying to stay calm. The sounds of battle could be heard even through the thick walls of the bunker. The deep rumble of explosions, the sharp crack of energy weapons, and the distant shouts of soldiers. Zara closed her eyes and tried to use her meditation techniques to stay calm, but fear kept breaking through. A human child, no more than 6 years old, was crying softly near Zara. The little girl had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she clutched a small stuffed animal to her chest. Her mother held her close, whispering soothing words, but the child's fear was overwhelming. Without thinking, Zara reached out and gently touched the child's forehead. Her natural healing abilities allowed her to sense the girl's emotions and provide some comfort. The child's crying gradually stopped, and she looked up at Zara with wide, curious eyes. "Are you an angel?" the little girl asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Zara smiled despite her fear. "No, little one, I'm just a doctor who wants to help." "My daddy is fighting the bad men," the girl said. "He told me he would keep us safe." "I'm sure he will," Zara replied, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. How could anyone stand against the savage stars? Hours passed in the shelter. The sounds of battle grew more distant, then closer, then distant again. Zara helped care for the other children, using her abilities to keep them calm while the adults tried to hide their own terror. She found herself impressed by how the humans organized themselves, sharing food and water, comforting each other, and maintaining hope even in the face of danger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the all-clear signal sounded. The heavy doors of the shelter opened, and human soldiers appeared. But these weren't the same polished guards Zara had seen when she arrived. These soldiers were dirty, bloodied, and exhausted. Their armor was scorched and dented, and some of them limped as they walked, but they were smiling. "It's over," announced a tall soldier with sergeant's stripes. "The pirates have been driven off. Everyone is safe." As the civilians began filing out of the shelter, Zara found herself walking beside Dr. Chen. "How many casualties?" the doctor asked the sergeant quietly. "Surprisingly few," the soldier replied. "Commander Hayes led the defense personally. Lost a few good people, but it could have been much worse." The pirates weren't expecting such organized resistance. Zara emerged from the bunker into the evening air, amazed to see that the base was still largely intact. There were scorch marks on some buildings and debris scattered around, but the damage was far less than she had feared. "The humans fought off the savage stars?" she asked Dr. Chen in disbelief. "Not just fought them off," Dr. Chen replied with obvious pride. "Destroyed 3 of their ships and captured 24 pirates. They won't be raiding this sector again anytime soon." As they walked back toward the medical facility, Zara saw groups of soldiers helping with cleanup efforts. Despite their exhaustion, they worked tirelessly to repair damage and ensure everyone was safe. Some of them were bandaging wounds on their fellow soldiers, while others distributed food and water to the civilians. One soldier in particular caught Zara's attention. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and intense brown eyes. His armor was more damaged than most, and there was a field bandage wrapped around his left arm. But he moved with purpose and authority, checking on civilians, directing repair efforts, and ensuring that everyone had what they needed. "That's Commander Hayes," Dr. Chen said, following Zara's gaze. "He's the one who planned our defense. 20 years of military service, and he's never lost a base under his command." Zara watched the commander as he knelt beside an injured alien trader, carefully examining a wound and calling for medical assistance. His hands were gentle despite their size, and his voice was calm and reassuring. This was one of the terrible human warriors she had been taught to fear. "He doesn't look like a monster," Zara said quietly. Dr. Chen glanced at her with surprise. "A monster? Commander Hayes? He's one of the kindest men I've ever known. He has 3 children of his own back on Earth, and he treats everyone on this base like family." Zara felt something shift inside her mind. The stories her grandmother had told, The fears that had dominated her thoughts for so long suddenly seemed less certain. The humans she had met today, Dr. Chen, the registration clerk, the soldiers, even Commander Hayes, none of them matched the brutal image she had carried. As they reached the medical facility, Commander Hayes approached them. Up close, Zara could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also something else: concern, compassion. He looked at her with genuine interest, not the cold calculation of a predator. "Dr. Velthis," he said, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle, "I wanted to personally apologize for the danger you were exposed to today. This wasn't the welcome we had planned for you." Zara found herself staring into his brown eyes, searching for any sign of the cruelty she had expected. She found none. Instead, she saw intelligence, kindness, and a deep weariness that spoke of someone who had carried heavy responsibilities for a long time. You saved us all," she managed to say. Commander Hayes shook his head. "That's what we do here. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Your work is vital to saving lives throughout this sector. The least we can do is make sure you're safe while you do it." As he walked away to continue his duties, Zara stood in stunned silence. Everything she thought she knew about humans was crumbling around her. These weren't the monsters from her grandmother's stories. These were people who risked their lives to protect others, who welcomed strangers with kindness, who fought not for conquest, but for defense. For the first time since arriving at the human base, Zara felt her fear being replaced by something else entirely: curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of understanding. The next few days passed in a blur of research and revelation for Zara. She threw herself into her work, determined to help find a cure for the plague that threatened the human colonies. But more than that, she found herself studying the humans around her with growing fascination. Every interaction challenged what she had believed about their species. Dr. Chen would stay late into the night, working tirelessly not for glory or profit, but because each day of delay meant more lives lost. The laboratory technicians treated her equipment with the same care they showed their own, never questioning her methods or showing resentment at having an outsider in their workspace. Most surprising of all was Commander Hayes. Despite running the entire military operation of the base, he found time to check on the medical team's progress. He would stop by the lab each evening, not to demand results or pressure them for speed, but to ask if they needed anything and to share updates from the affected colonies. "The situation on Kepler Prime is stabilizing," he reported one evening, standing at the edge of the main laboratory with his helmet tucked under his arm. "Your preliminary treatment recommendations have already saved over 200 lives." Zara looked up from her microscope, surprised. "Already? But I've only been here 4 days." "Sometimes that's all it takes to make a difference," Hayes replied with a tired smile. "Your people have a gift for healing that the rest of us can only dream of. We're grateful for every hour you spend here." After he left, Dr. Chen sat down beside Zara. "He does that every night, you know. Updates us on how our work is helping real people. Most commanders would just focus on deadlines and objectives." "Why is he different?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. 10 years ago, Commander Hayes lost his wife and youngest daughter to a plague outbreak on Europa. The cure existed, but it took too long to reach the outer colonies. He could have become bitter, angry at the universe for taking his family. Instead, he dedicated his life to making sure it never happens again. Every research facility he protects, every medical mission he supports, it's his way of honoring their memory. Zara felt something twist in her chest. Not quite sadness, but a deep empathy that surprised her. She had been taught that humans were incapable of such depth of feeling, that they moved through life concerned only with power and conquest. Yet here was a man driven not by ambition, but by love and loss. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She wandered the corridors of the base, marveling at details she hadn't noticed before. The common areas were filled with personal touches, photographs of families, artwork created by children, small gardens tended by off-duty personnel. This wasn't a military fortress designed for war, it was a community. She found herself in the observation deck, a small area with large windows overlooking the planet's twin moons. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. Commander Hayes stood at the far window, still in his uniform despite the late hour. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. "Too much to think about," Zara replied, approaching cautiously. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the weight of responsibility that seemed to rest on his broad shoulders. "I know the feeling," Hayes said softly. "Some nights the quiet is harder than the chaos." They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the moons drift across the star-filled sky. Finally, Zara gathered the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her. "Commander, why are you so kind to me? My people. We've never been allies of humanity. We've remained neutral in most conflicts, traded with your enemies as often as your friends. Yet you treat me like family." Hayes turned to look at her, his brown eyes thoughtful. "Dr. Veltis, do you know what I see when I look at you?" Zara shook her head, suddenly nervous. "I see someone who left the safety of her homeworld to help strangers. Someone who spends 18 hours a day in a laboratory, not for money or fame, but because she can't bear to see others suffer. Someone who used her abilities to comfort frightened children in a bunker, even though she was just as scared as they were." He paused, a sad smile crossing his face. "You remind me of my wife. She was a doctor, too. Always put others first. Always believed she could save everyone if she just worked hard enough." Zara felt her 3 hearts skip in perfect synchronization. "She sounds like a remarkable person." She was, and so are you. Hayes looked back out at the stars. "That's what most species don't understand about humanity. We don't see enemies and allies. We see individuals. We judge beings by their actions, not their species or their politics. You came here to help us, so you're family. It's that simple." "But the stories," Zara began, then stopped herself. "What stories?" Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was better than politeness. "My people tell stories about humans. They say you're ruthless conquerors who show no mercy to the weak, that you destroy entire worlds to expand your territory, that you're incapable of gentleness or compassion." Hayes nodded slowly, his expression understanding rather than offended. "Some of those stories are probably true. Humans aren't perfect, Dr. Veltis. We've made terrible mistakes, caused tremendous suffering. There have been wars, atrocities, moments when we forgot our better nature and let fear or anger guide us. Then why? Because we learned," Hayes said firmly. "Every mistake taught us something. Every tragedy made us more determined to do better. That's what humans do. We adapt, we grow, we try to become worthy of the trust others place in us." He gestured toward the base around them. "This place exists because we decided that protecting life was more important than taking it. Every person here, human or alien, chose to dedicate their lives to healing rather than harming." A soft chime echoed through the observation deck, indicating the start of the night shift change. Hayes straightened, preparing to return to his duties. "Commander," Zara said quickly before he could leave, "tomorrow I'd like to visit the wounded, the soldiers who were injured fighting the pirates. I might be able to help with their recovery." Hayes looked surprised. "That's very generous, but you didn't come here to treat our people. Your mission is the plague research." "The research will continue," Zara said firmly. "But I'm a healer. It's what I am, not just what I do." If I can help your soldiers recover faster, then they can get back to protecting others sooner." For a moment, Hayes just stared at her. Then his face broke into the first genuine smile Zara had seen from him. It transformed his entire appearance, making him look years younger and infinitely less burdened. "I think my wife would have liked you very much, Dr. Velthus." The next morning, Zara made her way to the medical ward where the injured soldiers were recovering. She had never treated humans before, but her healing abilities worked on most carbon-based life forms. She just had to be careful about dosages and treatment methods. The ward was bright and clean, with large windows that let in natural light. Human medics moved efficiently between beds, checking on patients and adjusting treatments. Zara was struck by their professionalism and genuine care for their patients. Dr. Chen introduced her to the head nurse, a stern-looking woman named Martinez, who seemed initially skeptical of alien medical techniques. But when Zara demonstrated her ability to accelerate cellular healing on a soldier with a severe burn, Martinez's attitude changed completely. "That's incredible," Martinez breathed, watching as the angry red wound on the soldier's arm faded to healthy pink skin. "How do you do that?" "It's a natural ability of my people," Zara explained. "We can encourage cells to repair themselves more quickly, reduce inflammation, and minimize scarring. It works best when combined with conventional medicine." Word of Zara's healing spread quickly through the base. Soon, she had a steady stream of patients, not just the soldiers wounded in the pirate attack, but personnel suffering from chronic conditions, old injuries that hadn't healed properly, and even stress-related ailments. What amazed Zara most was the soldiers' attitudes. Despite their reputations as fierce warriors, they were polite, grateful, and often concerned more about their comrades than themselves. Sergeant Miller, who had taken shrapnel to his leg defending the main gate, spent most of his treatment asking about the other wounded rather than focusing on his own pain. "How's Johnson doing?" he asked, as Zara worked on healing the damaged muscle tissue. "He took a bad hit to the chest." "He's recovering well," Zara assured him. "He should be back to light duty within a few days." "Good man, Johnson. Got 3 kids back on Mars. Always talks about them." Miller winced slightly as Zara's healing energy worked deeper into the wound. "Worth a dozen of me." This attitude was consistent among all the soldiers Zara treated. They were more concerned about their fellow humans and the civilians they protected than about their own injuries. It was exactly the opposite of what she had expected from a warrior culture. Late in the afternoon, Commander Hayes appeared in the medical ward. He wasn't there for treatment. He moved without any sign of injury despite the battle 3 days earlier. Instead, he went from bed to bed, checking on each soldier personally, asking about their recovery, and listening to their concerns. Zara watched from across the room as he sat beside a young private who couldn't have been more than 19 years old. The boy had been badly burned in an explosion and was still heavily bandaged. Hayes spoke to him quietly for several minutes, and Zara could see the soldier's tension ease as his commander's presence reassured him. "He does that every day," Dr. Martinez said, noticing Zara's attention. "Visits every single patient, learns their names, remembers details about their families, never misses a day no matter how busy he is." "He seems to genuinely care about them," Zara observed. "He does. Lost a lot of good people over the years, and it weighs on him. But it also makes him fight harder to bring the rest home safe." Martinez checked her data pad and frowned. "Speaking of which, he's due for his own medical check. Man drives himself too hard, never takes time to rest properly." As if summoned by their conversation, Hayes approached their station. "Dr. Velthus, I wanted to thank you for everything you're doing. The men and women here. They're not just soldiers to me. They're family. Seeing them recover so quickly because of your help means more than I can express." Zara studied his face, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion and stress. "When was the last time you had a proper medical examination, Commander?" Hayes looked surprised by the question. "I'm fine. Nothing wrong that a good night's sleep wouldn't cure." "When?" Zara insisted, her professional instincts kicking in. "6 months ago," Hayes admitted reluctantly. "Maybe 7. Dr. Martinez crossed her arms and gave him a stern look. "Commander, you require your personnel to maintain regular health checks. Shouldn't you follow the same standards?" "That's different. I'm not fighting on the front lines anymore." "You're running a base that protects thousands of people," Zara pointed out. "Your health affects their safety. Please let me examine you. Just a basic check to make sure everything is functioning properly." Hayes looked like he was about to protest, then sighed in defeat. "Fine, but make it quick. I have a conference call with Fleet Command in an hour." The examination revealed what Zara had suspected: chronic stress, mild malnutrition from skipping meals, and the beginnings of an ulcer brought on by years of high-pressure decisions. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but conditions that would gradually wear him down if left untreated. "You need to take better care of yourself," Zara told him as she finished her healing treatment. "Your body is showing signs of prolonged stress. If you don't address it now, it could develop into serious health problems." "I'll try to get more sleep," Hayes promised, though Zara could tell he wasn't really taking it seriously. "Commander," she said firmly, using the authoritative tone she reserved for difficult patients, "you told me that the people on this base are your family. How would your family feel if you collapsed from exhaustion because you refused to take care of yourself?" Hayes paused, considering her words. "Point taken. I'll be more careful." "And you'll report for regular checkups," Zara added. "And I'll report for regular checkups," he agreed with a slight smile. As Hayes left to attend his meeting, Dr. Martinez looked at Zara with admiration. "I've been trying to get him to take better care of himself for 2 years. You managed it in one conversation." "Sometimes people need to hear the right words from the right person," Zara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure why her opinion had mattered so much to the commander. That evening, Zara returned to her quarters feeling more exhausted than she had in days. The healing sessions had drained her energy, but more than that, the emotional weight of everything she was learning was overwhelming. Every interaction with the humans challenged her preconceptions, forcing her to rebuild her understanding of an entire species. She was preparing for bed when her door chimed. To her surprise, Commander Hayes stood in the hallway looking somewhat embarrassed and holding a small package. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said. "I wanted to give you something." Zara accepted the package curiously. Inside was a small sculpture made of polished wood, a delicate carving of a Catharian healing crystal, accurate down to the smallest detail. "One of my soldiers. Corporal Peterson is a wood carver in his spare time," Hayes explained. "When he heard how much you've been helping everyone, he wanted to make something to show his appreciation. I know it's not much compared to the healing you've provided, but—" Zara turned the sculpture over in her hands, amazed by the craftsmanship. Every facet of the crystal was perfect, carved with obvious skill and attention to detail. More than that, it represented something she had never expected from humans: artistic beauty created simply to express gratitude. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Peterson says he'd be honored if you'd accept it. He spent 3 days working on it, wanted to make sure it was perfect." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "I know your people value artistic expression. He hoped this would meet your standards." Zara looked up at Hayes, then back at the sculpture. A human soldier, recovering from injuries sustained protecting others, had spent his free time creating art for an alien he barely knew, simply because she had helped heal his wounds. "Please thank Corporal Peterson for me," she said softly. "This is one of the most thoughtful gifts I've ever received." Hayes nodded, looking relieved. "I will. He'll be pleased to know you like it." As he turned to leave, Zara called after him. "Commander, the stories my people tell about humans, they're wrong, aren't they?" Hayes paused in the doorway, considering his answer carefully. "Some of them are probably true. Humans have done terrible things in the past, just like every other species. But we try to learn from our mistakes. We try to do better." He looked back at her. "The only thing that really matters is who we choose to be today and who we want to become tomorrow." After he left, Zara sat in her quarters, holding the wooden sculpture, tears streaming down her cheeks. She thought of her grandmother's stories, of generations of fear and mistrust, of the image of humans as heartless conquerors. Then she thought of Dr. Chen working tirelessly to save lives, of Sergeant Miller more concerned about his comrades than himself, of Commander Hayes carrying the weight of protecting thousands of people while still finding time to care for each individual. She thought of a young soldier named Peterson, injured in battle, spending days carving a perfect gift for an alien healer who had eased his pain. Everything she had believed about humans was wrong. They weren't monsters or conquerors. They were people, flawed, complex, capable of both cruelty and incredible kindness. They were warriors who fought to protect rather than to destroy, healers who sought to cure rather than to harm, artists who created beauty in the midst of chaos. For the first time since arriving at the human base, Zara fell asleep without fear. Instead, she dreamed of wooden sculptures and healing hands, of brown eyes filled with compassion, and of a future where her people might finally understand what she was beginning to learn about humanity. 2 weeks after the pirate attack, Zara made a breakthrough that would change everything. She was working late in the laboratory, analyzing the latest test results from her experimental treatment, when the data suddenly clicked into place. The plague virus had a weakness she hadn't seen before, a specific protein sequence that her people's healing abilities could target and destroy. "Dr. Chen!" she called excitedly, her voice echoing through the nearly empty lab. "I think I've found it!" Dr. Chen rushed over from her own workstation, followed by the few other researchers still working the night shift. They gathered around Zara's computer terminal, studying the complex molecular diagrams that filled the screen. "The virus uses this protein to attach to healthy cells," Zara explained, pointing to a specific structure. "But if we can modify the healing energy to disrupt this protein's formation, the virus becomes harmless. It can't reproduce, can't spread, and the body's natural defenses can eliminate it." Dr. Chen's eyes widened as she understood the implications. "This isn't just a treatment. This is a cure." "A permanent cure," Zara confirmed. "And because it works at the molecular level, it should be effective against all known variants of the plague." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Chen contacted other research facilities throughout human space, sharing Zara's discovery and coordinating trials. Commander Hayes arrived at the laboratory despite the late hour, listening intently as Zara explained her findings. "How long before we can begin widespread implementation?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled, but his eyes showing barely contained hope. "If the trials go well, we could have the cure distributed to all affected colonies within a month," Dr. Chen replied. "Dr. Veltis's technique can be taught to other Catherian healers, and we can synthesize a medical version for non-telepathic species." Hayes closed his eyes for a moment, and Zara could see the weight of responsibility lifting from his shoulders. "Millions of lives," he whispered. "This will save millions of lives." But their celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from the base's control center. The Night Watch officer appeared on the laboratory's main screen, his face grim. "Commander, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet approaching our position. Configuration matches the hegemony battle group." Zara felt her 3 hearts freeze. The Catherian hegemony was the militaristic faction of her people who believed in isolation and superiority over other species. They viewed any cooperation with humans as betrayal, and they had opposed her mission from the beginning. "How long until they arrive?" Hayes asked, his professional demeanor snapping back into place. 6 hours at current speed. The fleet consists of 12 heavy cruisers and approximately 30 escort vessels. Sir, they're broadcasting a demand for the immediate surrender of any Cytherian nationals currently on this base. Hayes looked at Zara, his expression unreadable. "They're here for you." Zara nodded miserably. "The hegemony considers my work here to be treason. They believe I'm sharing sacred knowledge with inferior species. If they capture me..." "They won't," Hayes said firmly. "This base is under the protection of the Human Defense Force. We don't surrender our people to anyone." "Commander, you don't understand," Zara said urgently. "The hegemony fleet is massive. This base might have a few hundred soldiers and maybe a dozen patrol ships. They have enough firepower to destroy this entire world." "Then we'll have to be smarter than they are," Hayes replied calmly. He turned to the communications officer. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Request immediate reinforcements and inform them of the situation. Also, contact all civilian transports in the area and advise them to avoid this system until further notice." "Sir, the nearest HDF battle group is 3 days away," the officer reported. "Then we hold for 3 days," Hayes said simply. Dr. Chen looked between them with growing alarm. "Commander, surely there's another option. If Dr. Veltis leaves with them voluntarily..." "No," Zara said quietly, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I won't go back to them. I've seen what humans really are, and I won't let the hegemony's hatred and fear prevent this cure from reaching those who need it." Hayes studied her carefully. "Dr. Veltis, you understand what this means. If you stay here, you'll be choosing exile from your own people." "My people," Zara said, looking around the laboratory at the human researchers who had become her colleagues and friends, "are the ones who dedicate their lives to healing and protecting others. Species doesn't matter. The hegemony stopped being my people the moment they decided that ideology was more important than saving lives." Over the next few hours, the base transformed from a peaceful research facility into a fortress preparing for siege. Soldiers checked weapons and defensive systems while civilians were evacuated to the deepest shelters. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Zara was amazed by the humans' calm professionalism. There was no panic, no despair, no talk of surrender. Instead, she watched as Hayes and his staff methodically planned their defense, looking for every possible advantage and preparing for multiple scenarios. They were outnumbered 40-1, facing an enemy with vastly superior technology, and yet they approached the situation with the same methodical determination she had seen them apply to medical research. "Dr. Veltis," Hayes said as the base went to full alert status, "I need you and Dr. Chen to finish documenting your cure. If something happens to us, the galaxy needs to know what you've discovered." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Zara said firmly. "I won't allow it." Hayes smiled at her fierce expression. "I appreciate the confidence, but you should prepare for the possibility that we might not be able to protect you." "You still don't understand," Zara replied. "I'm not just a researcher. I'm a fully trained Cytherian healer, which means I'm also trained in our defensive techniques. My people might think I'm a traitor, but I still have all the abilities they taught me." Before Hayes could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the base. The hegemony fleet had arrived ahead of schedule. The main view screen in the command center showed the approaching ships, sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to flow through space like living creatures. They were beautiful and terrifying, their biotechnological hulls gleaming with an inner light that spoke of power beyond human comprehension. The lead ship opened communications, and Zara's heart sank as she recognized the figure that appeared on screen. High Admiral Thuvan was her own cousin, a brilliant strategist who had risen to power by preaching Cytherian superiority and the necessity of racial purity. "Human commander," Thuvan said, his melodious voice carrying undertones of contempt. "We demand the immediate surrender of the traitor Zara Velthis. She has violated sacred laws by sharing our healing knowledge with inferior species. Comply, and we will allow your people to evacuate peacefully." Hayes stepped forward, his bearing proud and uncompromising. "High Admiral, Dr. Velthis is under the protection of this base and the Human Defense Force. She is here voluntarily, working to save lives throughout the galaxy. I'm afraid I can't honor your request." Thuvan's expression darkened. "Commander, you clearly don't understand the situation. We have 42 ships with enough firepower to reduce your entire planet to molten rock. This is not a negotiation." "You're right," Hayes replied calmly. "It isn't. Dr. Velthis has made her choice, and we will respect and defend that choice regardless of the consequences. Even if it means the death of everyone on your base? Even then." Zara watched this exchange with growing amazement. Hayes wasn't bluffing or posturing. He genuinely meant what he said. He would rather die than betray her trust, would sacrifice his own life and the lives of his people to protect her right to choose her own path. Thuvan seemed equally surprised by the human's resolve. "You would die for a single alien? One who isn't even your own species?" "I would die to protect anyone who asked for our help," Hayes said simply. "That's what humans do. That's what makes us human." The communication ended, and Thuvan's fleet began moving into attack formation. Zara could see the tactical displays showing the hegemony ships spreading out to surround the base, their weapons charging for the first strike. "Commander," she said urgently, "there might be another way. The hegemony fleet is powerful, but they have a weakness. Their ships are biotechnological, which means they're essentially living creatures. My healing abilities work on living tissue." Hayes turned to look at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "If I can get close enough to their ships, I can disrupt their biological systems. It won't destroy them, but it might disable them long enough for your reinforcements to arrive." "Absolutely not," Hayes said immediately. "We're not sending you out there alone to face your own people. There has to be another option." "There isn't time," Zara replied. "The attack is about to begin, and you don't have the firepower to stop them. This is the only way to save everyone." Dr. Chen looked up from her computer terminal, her face pale. "Commander, long-range communications are being jammed. We can't contact Fleet Command or anyone else. We're on our own." The first hegemony ships opened fire, their bioenergy weapons striking the base's shields with tremendous force. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to maintain the defensive barriers. "Shields down to 60%, reported the tactical officer. "At this rate, we have maybe 20 minutes before they break through." Zara made her decision. Without waiting for permission, she rushed toward the hangar bay where the base's small shuttles were stored. Behind her, she could hear Hayes shouting orders to his men, and then footsteps running after her. "Dr. Velthis, stop!" he called as she reached the shuttle bay. "This is suicide!" "No," Zara replied, beginning the startup sequence for the nearest shuttle. "This is what I came here to do, not just to cure a plague, but to build a bridge between species. To show both humans and Cytherians that we can be better than our fears and prejudices." Hayes reached the shuttle just as she sealed the hatch. Through the transparent door, she could see the anguish in his eyes, the desperate desire to protect her even at the cost of his own life. It was the most human thing she had ever witnessed. "Zara," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you don't have to do this. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," she replied softly, her hand pressed against the door that separated them. "But thank you for showing me what courage really looks like." Thank you for teaching me that being human isn't about species. It's about choosing to protect others even when it costs you everything. The shuttle launched before Hayes could stop her, carrying Zara up through the base's shields and into the chaotic space battle above. Hegemony ships surrounded her immediately, their weapons tracking her small craft, but holding fire when they recognized Cytherian life signs aboard. Thuvan's voice filled her shuttle's communication system. Zara, you finally show some wisdom. Come aboard the flagship and we can end this unfortunate incident. I'm coming aboard, Zara replied, but not to surrender. She guided the shuttle toward the massive Hegemony flagship, a bioship nearly 2 kilometers long that pulsed with organic energy. As she approached the landing bay, she began gathering her healing abilities, focusing them in a way she had never attempted before. Instead of using her power to heal and repair, she reversed the process. She reached out with her mind, touching the living systems of the Hegemony ships, and began to disrupt their biological functions. Not to kill or destroy, but to induce a kind of sleep, a temporary shutdown that would disable the vessels without causing permanent harm. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The flagship's bioenergy weapons powered down, its movement systems went offline, and its defensive shields collapsed. Around the fleet, other ships began experiencing similar problems as Zara's disruption field spread from vessel to vessel. But the effort was enormous, far beyond anything she had ever attempted. Zara felt her strength draining away as she poured her life force into the massive undertaking. Her vision blurred, her 3 hearts began beating erratically, and she collapsed in the shuttle's pilot seat. Through the shuttle's viewports, she could see the Hegemony fleet drifting helplessly in space, their bioships dormant and peaceful. On the base's tactical screens, Hayes would be seeing his enemies suddenly vulnerable, their overwhelming advantage neutralized by a single Cytherian healer who had chosen to side with humanity. But Zara had given too much. She could feel her life force ebbing away, consumed by the massive effort of disabling 42 warships simultaneously. Her healing abilities had always worked by transferring her own life energy to others. And this time, she had transferred too much. Her shuttle drifted toward the disabled flagship as her consciousness faded. The last thing she heard was Hayes's voice over the communication system, calling her name with desperate urgency. When Zara awoke, she was lying in the familiar surroundings of the base's medical ward. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, and she could hear the normal sounds of the facility going about its daily routine. No alarms, no battle stations, no sense of desperate urgency. Dr. Chen was sitting beside her bed, monitoring her vital signs. When she saw Zara's eyes open, the human doctor's face lit up with relief. "Welcome back," Dr. Chen said softly. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. We weren't sure you were going to make it." "The fleet," Zara whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "Disabled just like you planned. When their systems went offline, our patrol ships were able to move in and take control. The Hegemony forces are currently being held in protective custody while diplomatic negotiations continue." Dr. Chen smiled. "You saved us all, Zara. Again." "The cure. Already being distributed to every affected colony. The first reports are incredible. Complete remission in 98% of patients. You've saved millions of lives." Zara tried to sit up, but found she was still too weak. "My cousin, Thuvan. He's been asking to see you. Apparently your little demonstration had quite an impact on the Hegemony leadership. It's hard to maintain beliefs about human brutality when those same humans are providing medical care to prisoners who were trying to kill them." The door to the medical ward opened and Commander Hayes entered. He looked tired but relieved, and his face broke into a genuine smile when he saw Zara was awake. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching her bed carefully. "Like I used up about 10 years of my life force in 10 minutes, Zara replied with weak humor. "But alive, thanks to human medicine." Dr. Chen says you nearly died saving us. That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. I learned from the best, Zara said, looking at him meaningfully. Hayes was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was Corporal Peterson's wooden sculpture, the carved healing crystal that had meant so much to her. This never left your side, he said, placing it gently in her hands. Peterson insisted that it would help you heal faster. He may have been right. Your recovery has been remarkably quick. Zara held the sculpture against her chest, feeling its smooth surface and thinking about the soldier who had carved it. Where is Corporal Peterson now? He's been promoted to sergeant and put in charge of cultural exchange programs, Hayes replied with amusement. Turns out he has a talent for helping different species understand each other. He's been working with some of the hegemony prisoners, showing them what human art and culture are really like. Over the next few days, Zara's strength returned gradually. She was visited by members of the research team, soldiers she had healed, and even some of the human children from the base. Each visitor brought stories of the changes her actions had brought about. The Catherian hegemony, faced with overwhelming evidence of human compassion and their own prisoners being treated with kindness and respect, had agreed to enter into formal diplomatic negotiations. Several younger hegemony officers had requested to remain at the base to study human culture and learn about interspecies cooperation. Most importantly, the cure for the plague was spreading rapidly throughout human space and beyond. Other species were requesting copies of the treatment, and Catherian healers who had been inspired by Zara's example were volunteering to help with implementation. On her last day in the medical ward, Zara received an unexpected visitor. High Admiral Thuven entered the room, no longer wearing his military uniform, but dressed in simple civilian clothes. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Cousin," he said quietly, using the intimate family address for the first time in years. "Admiral," Zara replied carefully. "Not anymore. I've resigned my commission." Thuven sat down in the chair beside her bed, looking older than she remembered. "Your actions. What you did to save the humans, what they did to save you. It forced me to examine everything I believed about other species. And what did you find? That I was wrong. About humans. About cooperation. About the nature of strength and honor." He looked out the window at the base's courtyard, where humans and Catherians could be seen working together on various projects. True strength isn't the ability to dominate others, it's the willingness to sacrifice yourself to protect them. They talked for hours, Thuven asking careful questions about her experiences and listening to her descriptions of human kindness and courage. When he finally left, he carried with him a formal request from the Catherian Council to establish permanent diplomatic relations with humanity. The day Zara was released from the medical ward, Commander Hayes found her in the observation deck where they had first really talked. She was standing at the same window looking out at the twin moons, but her expression was very different from that first night. "Dr. Chen tells me you're cleared for travel," Hayes said, joining her at the window. "Yes. The transport ship arrives tomorrow to take me back to Catherius Prime." Zara paused, then added quietly, "I've been asked to serve as the first Catherian ambassador to humanity." Hayes nodded, though she could see mixed emotions in his reflection in the window. "Congratulations. You'll be perfect for the role. It means I'll be stationed on Earth, working with your diplomatic corps. I'll be far from home, living among humans permanently." She turned to look at him directly. "I wanted to ask you, do you think humans and Catherians can really learn to live together, despite all the fear and mistrust?" Hayes considered her question seriously. 6 weeks ago, I would have said it was unlikely. Too much history, too many differences." He smiled. "But then I met a Catherian healer who was terrified of humans, convinced we were monsters. I watched her overcome that fear, risk her life to save us, and inspire an entire fleet of her own people to reconsider their beliefs. If she can change that much, I think anything is possible." "She had a good teacher," Zara replied softly. "No," Hayes said, shaking his head. "She had a good heart. The teacher just helped her find the courage to follow it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow, Zara would begin her journey back to Catherius Prime to accept her new role as ambassador. She would work to build bridges between species, to heal the wounds of mistrust and fear, and to create a future where cooperation replaced conflict. But tonight, she was simply a healer who had found her purpose, standing beside a soldier who had taught her that the greatest strength was the willingness to protect others, regardless of the cost. The wooden sculpture of the healing crystal rested in her hands, a reminder that even in the darkest times, people could create beauty and meaning. It was a very human thing to do, she thought. And she was beginning to understand that being human wasn't about genetics or biology. Being human was about choosing compassion over cruelty, cooperation over conflict, and hope over fear. It was about standing up for those who couldn't protect themselves, about healing instead of harming, about building instead of destroying. As she looked up at the stars that would soon carry her to her new life as an ambassador, Zara Veltis smiled. She was still Catherian by birth, but in all the ways that truly mattered, she had learned to be human, and she was proud of it.